Welcome to another episode of China Update, where I provide you with the most up-to-date political, economic, and geostrategic analysis on the world's number 2 economy. My name is Tony. Let's jump in. Okay, happy Sunday everybody. Yesterday we did a deep dive into China's Belt and Road Forum. That was a big episode. If you're interested in this very important initiative and what it means for how China will interact with the world, check out yesterday's video. Today we look at Russian-China relations specifically, as well as China's evolving Middle East policy, especially in relation to the ongoing conflict between the Israelis and Palestinians. And once again, just a reminder, next week I will be in Hong Kong. For anyone who is in Hong Kong and would like to come to a meetup, please flick me an email at the address in the description below. Tell me a little bit about yourself and whether you can make it to the Thursday evening, Friday noon, or Saturday noon event. I hope to see many of you next week in Hong Kong. In advance of his visit to China to attend the Belt and Road Forum, Russian leader Vladimir Putin gave an interview to CCTV, and Foreign Minister Wang Yi met with his counterpart from Russia, Lavrov. In the interview, Putin gave his full-throated support for the initiative. Since the Russian invasion of Ukraine and the subsequent Western response with sanctions, Russia and China have grown much more interconnected through trade. According to statistics released by the General Administration of Customs of China on Friday, from January through September 2023, the trade volume between China and Russia was more than $176 billion, a year-on-year increase of 29.5%. Of this figure, China's exports to Russia came to over $81 billion, an increase of almost 57%, and China's imports from Russia exceeded $94 billion, an increase of 12.7%. On his first day in Beijing, Putin had a long meeting with General Secretary Xi Jinping, telling Russian state media, quote, "We talked with China's president for 3 hours. I can't tell you everything, but topics included the entire bilateral agenda, a lot of issues there. It's the economy, finance, political integration, and joint work on international platforms. We discussed in detail the situation in the Middle East as well. I also briefed the president on the situation on the Ukrainian track in detail. All these external factors are common threats. They strengthen Russian-Chinese interaction." End quote. The two also discussed ways to accelerate plans to reduce their reliance on the global dollar system. For his part, General Secretary Xi Jinping reaffirmed Beijing's partnership with Moscow, lauding annual bilateral trade between the countries reaching a historic high, and adding, quote, "Over the past decade, from 2013 to the present, I've had 42 meetings with Mr. President Putin, establishing a strong working relationship and deep friendship." End quote. Interestingly, though, Xi did not mention the term no limits partnership, which was used to describe the relationship during Putin's last visit to Beijing in February 2022, days before he launched his invasion of Ukraine. Xi also didn't mention the phrase during his visit to Moscow in March earlier this year. Curiously, despite flowery and friendly words from the two leaders and the promise of an action plan through 2030, the meeting appeared to have delivered few tangible results. The Power of Siberia 2 pipeline was not mentioned, for example. This is a deal which Putin had expressed was done and dusted back during the March meeting. The pipeline would help Russia reroute its gas exports from the traditional European markets to new Chinese ones. UK-based Financial Times writes this week that the two leaders' meetings come despite repeated warnings from senior EU officials in recent weeks, including the bloc's chief diplomat, Joseph Borrell, who visited Beijing last week, that China's failure to condemn the Ukraine invasion is souring its image in Europe, adding that China has balanced private skepticism about Russia's proposals in Ukraine with a shared hostility to the US-backed political and economic order. US-based The Wall Street Journal writes that the prominence given to Putin at the summit and the near absence of Western representation among the roughly 24 world leaders who attended underlines how geopolitical divisions have deepened since Xi first proposed the Belt and Road a decade ago. The two leaders also discussed Israel's operations in Gaza, converging towards a pro-Palestinian stance. And this brings us to our next topic, China's Middle East policy developments from this week. If you're enjoying the episode, don't forget to hit the like button. Sharing and subscribing is a big help too. Let's move on to part 2. On Monday, China's top diplomat Wang Yi, in a phone conversation, told his Egyptian counterpart that the United Nations Security Council, quote, should play its role in bringing about a ceasefire and an end to the fighting as soon as possible. China will continue to stand on the side of international morality and support the Palestinian people in restoring their legitimate national rights, end quote. Adding that, quote, China supports the Arab and Islamic countries in forming a common position and speaking with a united voice, end quote. This week saw the disturbing Gaza hospital explosion. China's foreign ministry spokesperson gave a rather neutral reply to a question about the tragedy, expressing shock and extending sympathies to the injured. As is usually the case, state media was less diplomatic and ambiguous, leaning into blaming Israel. For example, the popular state-run CCTV Evening News told viewers, quote, Palestinian President Abbas condemned the Israeli bombing of the Gaza hospital as an intolerable act of war and massacre, end quote. Then, the following day, in his meeting with the Prime Minister of Egypt for the Belt and Road Forum, General Secretary Xi Jinping called for a ceasefire, expressing, quote, it is critical to prevent the conflict from expanding or even losing control and causing a serious humanitarian crisis. The fundamental way out of the recurring Palestine-Israel conflict lies in implementing the two-state solution and establishing an independent state of Palestine, so as to realize the peaceful coexistence of Palestine and Israel, end quote. Okay, that is a brief unpacking of the developments from the last week. Now let's once again discuss what exactly is China's Middle East policy and how does this conflict affect it. Last week, I expressed that China doesn't really have a strong historical, religious, or ideological interest in the Middle East. Its main considerations are geopolitical and economic. China has an interest in regional peace to avoid disrupting energy markets. We remember that China is a massive net energy importer, and much of these imports come from the Middle East. And Beijing has an interest in trying to maintain a decent relationship with both Israel and major Arab states. This week, the US's newly appointed Special Envoy for Middle East humanitarian issues and former ambassador to both Turkey and Lebanon, David Satterfield, speaking to U.S. media outlet Politico, expressed, quote, the Chinese don't really want to take a stand on any of this stuff. They don't really have much influence one way or the other. They aren't taken seriously by any of the parties. Nobody wants to offend them, but they are not actors. And that is not new. That is the past 20 to 25 years, end quote. Is this the case? Perhaps. However, there are top academics who move in policy circles in Beijing who debate what China's Middle East policy should be. One of these voices is Wu Bingbing, the head of Peking University's Institute of Arab Islamic Culture, who actually published an article on the very topic of China's Middle East policy recently. It is useful for us to examine this article for two reasons. First, it gives a very Chinese-centric perspective of the Middle East and what Beijing's Middle East policy should be, giving us insights into Beijing's worldviews, or at least those in Beijing who think and debate these topics. And second, this article was published before the Hamas attack on Israel. Full disclosure, Wu Bingbing was one of my professors when I studied my master's at Peking University. We didn't always see eye to eye in our discussions, however. The article is called Why the Great Reconciliation in the Middle East, and was published in the Beijing Cultural Review, August 2023. The excellent newsletter, Sinification, has actually provided a great 10-point summary of this article. Let us examine these 10 points, and remember, what is important here is not whether we think these points are accurate or not, but rather to understand, based on these observations, the elite view within Beijing. 1. China and Russia have stepped up their diplomatic efforts in the Middle East just as the United States has reduced its involvement. 2. Countries in the Middle East have been shifting their focus towards Asia. Beijing's brokering of the Saudi-Iran deal was helped by this trend. 3. Tensions in the region should stop being viewed simply through the lens of sectarian, Sunni versus Shia, and ethnic, Arabs versus Persians, strife, but rather through the prism of geopolitical rivalries and domestic politics. 4. Although the Israeli-Palestinian conflict remains at the heart of the Middle East's problems, Israel has been successfully marginalizing this issue and attempting to isolate the Palestinians diplomatically. As a result, the international community has been neglecting this flashpoint at a time when tensions were so evidently rising. 5. Coupled with Israeli far-right's hawkishness and Washington's clear bias in favor of Israel, have exacerbated divisions and hostilities in the region. 6. The exclusive nature of Washington's policy stands in sharp contrast to Beijing's proposed new security architecture for the Middle East, which seeks to involve all actors in the region, including Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Palestinian Islamic Jihad. 7. China pursues balanced diplomacy in the Middle East, which entails not picking sides and not making any enemies. 8. To help strengthen its ties with the region, Beijing's strategy has been one of positive balancing. That is, closer cooperation with one actor, e.g. Iran, will pressure others to follow suit, e.g. Arab Gulf countries. 9. China's two main priorities in the region are, first, resolving the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and second, establishing a Gulf security dialogue platform. And 10. If Chinese initiatives such as the Belt and Road Initiative, Global Development Initiative, and Global Security Initiative are highly compatible with the region's need for development and security, Chinese-style modernization is the ideational glue that can help bring countries in the Middle East and China closer together. This is perhaps one of the best summaries of the current elite worldview within Beijing when it comes to those who debate China's policy in the Middle East. I'd be interested to know what you all think of some or all of these points. Let me know your thoughts in the description below. Okay, that is today's episode of China Update. Thank you so much everybody for watching. Have a wonderful Sunday, have a lovely weekend, and we'll be back with regular episodes from tomorrow.